It began on a quiet Tuesday morning in late spring. The sun had just started warming the dewy grass when Martha Green noticed a white envelope tucked beneath her doormat. The paper was thin and official-looking, marked with the all-too-familiar blue HOA logo. She sighed before even opening it. In her 20 years living on Maple Crest Lane, she had received more HOA letters than birthday cards. Inside, a neatly typed notice read: Outstanding HOA fine, $5, violation of lawn height standards, 1.75 inches over limit. Failure to comply may result in enforcement action. Martha couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. $5. That wasn't even enough to buy a sandwich anymore. Her yard looked just fine, lush, trimmed, and full of flowers that brightened up the cul-de-sac. But this particular HOA, she knew, thrived on control. Every blade of grass, every paint shade, every mailbox post had to meet their exacting standards. She tossed the paper onto the counter, muttering, "They must be bored." A week passed before another envelope arrived, this one red-stamped final warning. The tone had changed. It threatened on-site inspection and property access if unresolved. Martha frowned. Access? Over $5, she whispered. That night, she called her son, Jake Green, a 33-year-old Special Forces veteran who had recently returned home from overseas duty. Jake had spent the last decade in places where rules meant survival: Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq. But he'd come home hoping for peace, not confrontation. "Mom," Jake said over the phone, calm but firm, "they can't just walk into your house." "HOA or not, that's trespassing." "I know, honey," she sighed, "but they sound serious this time." Jake's instincts tingled. He'd heard that tone before, people who believed a badge or title gave them power. He told her to keep her doors locked and cameras recording, just in case. That night, as Martha watched her quiet street fade into darkness, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. The HOA had always been strict, but this felt different, almost militarized. Jake promised to come stay for the weekend, just to keep an eye on things. Martha smiled at the thought of her son being home again. She didn't know it yet, but that $5 fine was about to ignite a chain of events that would turn their peaceful neighborhood into a battleground, one where her son's training would make all the difference. The following Saturday morning dawned bright and deceptively calm. Birds chirped lazily in the maple trees lining the quiet cul-de-sac, and neighbors tended to their gardens, oblivious to the storm about to hit. Inside her home, Martha Green sipped her coffee nervously, glancing at the door as if expecting it to fly off its hinges at any moment. The calm didn't last long. Around 10 a.m., a loud, aggressive banging shattered the morning silence. It rattled the doorframe so forcefully that Martha instinctively gripped the edge of the counter. Her heart raced. A flash of panic surged through her. She hadn't anticipated anyone actually showing up. When she cautiously peeked through the peephole, her eyes widened. 3 men stood outside, clad in black jackets that read HOA Enforcement Division in stark white letters. Their appearance was intimidating: dark sunglasses, scowling faces, and a swagger that suggested authority far beyond a mere neighborhood association. Martha opened the door just a crack. "Can I help you?" she asked, keeping her voice calm. One of the men, tall and stocky, stepped forward, his badge swinging from his jacket. "You've refused compliance." "We're here to assess property conditions," he barked. There was no warmth, no civility, only the sharp edge of intimidation. Martha held the door firmly. "I'm sorry, but you cannot enter my home." "I have every right to refuse." The man's face darkened. "We have authorization. You will allow us entry." A sudden chill ran down her spine. Something about their posture and the way they spoke made it clear this was no ordinary HOA visit. These men seemed trained, disciplined, almost militaristic. She took a step back, gripping the doorframe like a lifeline. From the kitchen, Jake had heard the commotion. Instantly alert, he moved silently, every step precise, every muscle taut. Years of Special Forces training sharpened his instincts. He didn't even need to see their faces to recognize danger. His mind raced: trespassing, threatening behavior. Stay calm. Control the situation. As he approached the entryway, he saw one man shove the door wider, ignoring Martha's protests. Another lifted a clipboard, snapping pictures of her living room through the gap, muttering about evidence of non-compliance. Jake stopped, his presence unnoticed for now, and assessed the situation. 3 aggressors, all likely underestimating him, all convinced a $5 fine gave them the right to bully an elderly woman in her own home. He straightened, his voice calm but commanding as he stepped into the doorway. "Gentlemen, you've just crossed a line." The tallest man froze mid-step. The other 2 looked toward him, confusion flickering in their eyes. Jake's calm intensity radiated authority, the kind that doesn't require shouting to be felt. For the first time, the HOA cops realized this wasn't going to be an easy intimidation. The hallway felt impossibly small, charged with a tension that made the air heavy. Martha clutched the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. The men outside were no longer simply annoyances, they had crossed the invisible line that separated neighborhood bureaucracy from criminal trespass. And now, they were inside. One of the intruders, emboldened by arrogance, stepped fully into the living room, snapping pictures of her furniture, her framed family photos, and the neatly stacked magazines on the coffee table. "Evidence of non-compliance," he muttered, as if repeating a mantra to justify their actions. Martha's voice shook as she shouted, "Leave my house. You do not have permission." From the shadowed hallway, Jake emerged. Tall, imposing, and radiating calm authority, he moved like a predator assessing a threat, precise, controlled, unflinching. The 3 men froze for a fraction of a second, unsure if they had stumbled into a normal suburban dispute or something far more dangerous. "Gentlemen," Jake said evenly, his voice a low rumble that immediately commanded attention, "you have trespassed on private property. Leave now." The tall one laughed dismissively, stepping closer. "This is HOA business. You don't get to make the rules." Jake's eyes narrowed, his stance steady, every muscle poised to react. Years of special forces training had taught him one thing: hesitation could be deadly. But he didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, closing the distance with calm precision, and grabbed the man's wrist with a controlled, practiced grip. In a single fluid motion, he twisted and guided the intruder toward the door, careful not to overexert force but enough to assert dominance. The man stumbled, then realized with growing horror that he was utterly outmatched. The other 2 men hesitated, glancing at each other nervously. For the first time, their confidence wavered. None had expected this, an unassuming suburban house harboring a seasoned warfighter. Martha exhaled in relief, her trembling fingers brushing against Jake's arm. She had never felt safer, not from burglars, not from strangers, certainly not from petty HOA bullies. Jake's gaze swept the room. Calm, measured, commanding. "You've got one last chance," he said. "Turn around. Leave. Now." The remaining men, confronted with a presence that emanated both authority and lethal capability, took a step back. Slowly, cautiously, they moved toward the door, muttering excuses and protests that sounded increasingly hollow in the quiet living room. By the time they left, the air had changed. The house, once merely a cozy suburban dwelling, now felt like a fortress. Martha knew deep in her heart that things would never be the same. Jake looked at his mother, a faint smile on his lips. "You're safe now, Mom," he said softly. "No one's going to push you around in your own home." Weeks passed, and the Green household slowly returned to its normal rhythm. The adrenaline of the confrontation had faded, replaced by a quiet sense of triumph. The local authorities had concluded their investigation, and the HOA Enforcement Division had been officially disbanded. Several members faced trespassing and harassment charges, their arrogance finally meeting the weight of the law. Martha finally stepped out onto her porch one sunny morning, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. She watched the familiar street, lined with maple trees and blooming gardens, with a mix of relief and disbelief. "All that over $5, she said, shaking her head. Jake, leaning against the railing beside her, gave a small chuckle. "It's never really about the money, Mom," he replied. "It's about standing up to people who think they're above the law." News outlets continued to cover the story, highlighting the absurdity of a $5 fine escalating into a full-blown confrontation and legal battle. Interviews with neighbors revealed a community long frustrated with the HOA's petty rules and oppressive tactics. Their voices, once silenced, were finally heard. The HOA president, Ron Walters, attempted damage control, claiming the situation was a misunderstanding. But the footage of his overconfident enforcers, combined with testimony from the Greens and neighbors, left him with no credibility. Public outrage forced the HOA to revise its policies, significantly reducing its power over residents. Life slowly returned to normal inside the Green home. Martha tended her garden, savoring the simple joy of peace, while Jake began resuming his post-service routines, comforted by the knowledge that his skills had protected his family. There was laughter again in the house, quiet evenings unbroken by the fear of intrusion. For Martha, the experience had been transformative. She realized that courage doesn't always roar, sometimes it is the calm, steady presence of someone prepared, someone who loves fiercely, that protects what matters most. And so, the Greens' home remained a sanctuary. The $5 fine, once a symbol of petty bureaucracy and intimidation, had become a story of resilience, courage, and unexpected heroism. From that day forward, neighbors knew two things: the HOA could no longer bully them, and the Green family's quiet street had been forever changed, all thanks to a mother, her son, and a small fine that sparked an extraordinary stand for justice. By mid-afternoon, the neighborhood had begun to notice an unusual flurry of activity at the Green residence. A few curious neighbors peered cautiously from behind hedges, whispering about the commotion they'd heard earlier. But inside, the tension had shifted from immediate threat to aftermath, a quiet storm of uncertainty. Martha sat on the couch, still shaking slightly, as Jake examined the footage from her doorbell camera. Every angle had captured the intruders' aggressive movements, their attempts to force entry, and the moments when Jake had intervened. The clarity of the evidence made his mother's worries seem almost surreal. "They really thought they could just come in here," she murmured. Before they could digest the moment fully, the unmistakable wail of sirens filled the air. Real police vehicles pulled up outside, their lights flashing, officers stepping out with deliberate authority. The so-called HOA Enforcement Division members, who moments ago had radiated dominance, now looked small and uncertain under the scrutiny of actual law enforcement. The tallest man tried to maintain his bravado. "Officer, this is HOA business." "Step aside," one officer interrupted, motioning for calm. "We received reports of an unlawful entry. We're investigating." Martha and Jake explained the situation, showing the camera footage and detailing the events that had led to the confrontation. The officers watched the video closely, noting the trespass, the intimidation tactics, and the clear overreach. The HOA cops were flustered, their protests faltering under the weight of undeniable evidence. It became quickly apparent to the authorities: these individuals had no legal right to enter the Green residence. Their badges were unofficial, their claims of authority invalid. Attempts to press charges against Jake evaporated under scrutiny. It was self-defense and lawful protection of property. Within hours, the story began to spread beyond the neighborhood. Local news outlets picked up the incident, portraying it as a shocking case of HOA overreach. Interviews with Martha and Jake painted a picture of a suburban family caught in a bizarre battle over a trivial $5 fine, and a son's extraordinary training becoming a crucial shield. The HOA's reputation began to crumble. Neighbors, previously hesitant to speak out, came forward with their own accounts of intimidation, petty fines, and harassment. A community that had once been silent now had a collective voice. Martha, exhausted but relieved, finally allowed herself to breathe. Jake remained vigilant, knowing that while the immediate threat had passed, the ripple effects would continue. But for the first time in weeks, there was hope that justice, real, tangible justice, would prevail. The $5 fine, ridiculous on its own, had triggered an extraordinary series of events that would change Maple Crest Lane forever.